Your body is not a cold steel machine. Your body is the house where you will live every second of the rest of your life. And that's how you need to see it. What's the problem? That no one taught us how to give our house basic maintenance. We spend years ignoring the leaks, letting the trash pile up in the basement, and overloading the electrical system. Please pay close attention, because aging isn't simply about the physical house itself becoming old. Aging is truly when the essential utilities within it start to significantly fail, when the once clear hallways are increasingly cluttered with various junk, and we've unfortunately lost the vital keys to the most important rooms. Well then, today we are going to deeply understand why is your cherished house progressively becoming uninhabitable. We're going to thoroughly discover precisely why you often feel utterly tired, even long before your busy day truly begins. Please stay with me, because today we're going to deeply step into the intricate kitchen of your very own biology and carefully observe exactly why that vital internal fire is slowly but surely going out. All right. Think of your muscles as if they were a huge industrial kitchen. Imagine it's the most important room in your house because it's the one that prepares energy for the whole house. And in that kitchen, there are thousands of little burners called mitochondria. Remember that name, mitochondria. They are responsible for taking food, glucose, and fats and turning them into pure energy and life. When you are still quite young, you typically have thousands of little burners, all working at their absolute full capacity, burning brightly. You can throw a lot of wood on the fire, and the kitchen burns it all without any problem. As the years go by, something silent starts to happen. It's called sarcopenia. We start to lose muscle. Our kitchen gets smaller. And it's as if, in that industrial kitchen I'm telling you about, we started removing burners, and suddenly, after some time, without you noticing, one day you find yourself with only a small burner for the whole house. And even so, you keep buying the same amount of food as when you had lots of burners. What happens when that occurs? Well, it's quite simple to understand. The excess food gradually piles up on the kitchen counter. It then begins to rot and decay, which inevitably attracts various unwelcome insects. In other words, the significant amount of sugar remains stubbornly in your bloodstream because there's absolutely nowhere for it to be properly burned off, and that decaying rotten food is truly the very beginning of a much larger, impending disaster. The toxic smoke from that kitchen starts rising straight up to the roof. And now I want you to listen. Listen to this very carefully, because before the house goes into an emergency situation, it usually gives you a warning. It's as if you had little alarms, although the truth is it does so in a very quiet voice so as not to bother you too much. And I'm going to show you 4 potential signs that your body, your house, is warning you that an emergency could be coming. The first is when you start to feel sleepy after eating. You eat, and instead of feeling energized, you get sleepy. That's not normal. That's sugar that isn't being burned. The second sign is that mental fog you sometimes wake up with in the mornings, or that persistent tiredness. You sleep, but you don't feel rested. You think, but it's hard to follow arguments. That's not age. What that is energy that's being poorly managed. Third, a progressive and noticeable loss of strength. Without even realizing it, you might find yourself lifting less and less weight, and it becomes increasingly harder and more challenging to climb stairs. And that's not just simply a natural part of aging. No, that's your precious muscle mass slowly but surely disappearing. Fourth, silent bodily changes like abdominal fat that appears without explanation, or that sleep you get every time. Lighter and lighter. All of these are small signs that a fire is starting. And what I'm telling you isn't just theory, because it's happening to me. And let me tell you just one more important thing. What I'm telling you, I did not acquire knowledge from reading books or diligently studying. I started to notice small signs, and I'm going to tell you about one of them. Things that didn't hurt, that would come and go. And deep down you think, yes, these are changes that make you frown a little, right? But since they let you go on with your day, well, you don't pay much attention to them. I used to train, and I still do strength training because I'm a staunch enemy of sarcopenia, and I followed a super strict diet, a very radical keto diet, because I truly thought it was the very best thing, and I genuinely believed I was doing absolutely everything right. Until suddenly, I clearly understood what I had just told you. The body always gives you a warning, but it doesn't shout loudly. One day, little by little, my urine started to come out very foamy. Like I said, it would come and go. It wasn't consistently constant, you know? Nothing consistent. And of course, it wasn't alarming either. And that's when I decided to listen to it. I mean, seeing that didn't scare me. What it gave me was information. And that information led me to get out of that extreme diet and change my perspective. You think about it. Listen to yourself and observe yourself. And above all, learn to interpret those little signals. Never accept that, that's just part of getting older. Because that's not how it is, not at all. By acting the way I'm telling you, I understood something much bigger, and that leads me to ask you a key question. It's a question I think very few people ask themselves. What does all this have to do with my mind? Because you might genuinely think to yourself, well, what you are telling me here is really all about metabolism, weight management, and muscle development. But no, what starts in the body always ends up in the brain. And it's truly something amazing, because really no one explains it to you. But you start to notice more and more that there are these little intoxications in your brain, little moments when you say, I didn't have this before. And it's very clear. If the kitchen doesn't burn the fuel, that toxic smoke rises up to the roof, which is your brain. And it's on the roof where the most delicate wires are of the house. Your brain also has a wonderful cleaning team called the Glymphatic System. And just think about it, as if it were a truly gigantic, enormous dishwasher that only turns on at night, precisely when you sleep deeply and soundly. Well, when we were 20 years old, that powerful dishwasher ran tirelessly for 10 full hours and left absolutely everything sparkling clean and utterly spotless. But at 60, the dedicated cleaning team has gotten noticeably smaller and is quite tired. If your body's internal kitchen, in other words, if your entire metabolism is constantly smoking, becoming truly toxic all day long because you simply don't have the necessary muscle, the powerful burners to effectively burn off all the excess sugar, then inevitably the brain's delicate dishwasher ends up getting completely clogged and overwhelmed. Now it's smaller. What happens then? Trash accumulates in your neurons and the wires short circuit. And that's why it's so hard for you to remember that name that's on the tip of your tongue, but just won't come out. Or that's why you feel that brain fog I mentioned sometimes in the morning when you wake up. It's not that your brain is old, no. It's that your brain is dirty because your kitchen isn't working properly. It's actually very easy and very simple. When the kitchen doesn't burn, if the roof is dirty, the house, it does exactly what you would do in a situation like that. And you're probably wondering what it means to go into emergency mode. And this is where the characters we met in the previous video appear, the squatters. The problematic zombie cells that unfortunately get stuck there, since the entire house is in utter chaos. These dysfunctional cells completely stop working. But please, pay close attention. They stubbornly refuse. As I previously mentioned, they absolutely refuse to leave. They unceremoniously settle in the main living room, proceed to deliberately break the furniture and thoroughly dirty the whole environment with their constant panic signals. And then, inevitably, the absolute worst happens. We precisely call this detrimental condition insulin resistance. In other words, your healthy, vibrant cells, surrounded by all these decaying, lifeless zombies, to protect themselves from the excessive, putrid, rotten food floating abundantly in the bloodstream, decide to completely change the locks to thoroughly protect themselves and deliberately don't let anyone in. But now, notice this crucial point. They don't even let in the vital energy they desperately need to survive and thrive. The whole house gets locked down. You have a pantry that is completely full of various types of food items, including an abundance of sugar. But your individual cells within your body are literally starving because they are unable to effectively open the cellular door. That's the profound metabolic grave, a state of severe dysfunction. And now I'm going to give you a brief scientific explanation so you don't think all of this is just an example that doesn't work, because it's pure science. What I have just described to you in detail is precisely what is understood in comprehensive scientific terms as a complex progressive neuroinflammatory metabolic cascade, a process that unfolds over time. Muscle tissue is indeed the body's primary and most significant peripheral metabolic organ, and it is also the single largest consumer of both glucose and fatty acids, even when the body is completely at rest. This is thanks to its high density of mitochondria. And mitochondria are fundamentally responsible for the vital processes of oxidative phosphorylation and the crucial production of ATP. And now you will clearly see ATP is an essential molecule that functions somewhat like the universal currency of cellular energy, powering numerous biological activities within the cell. Every time a cell needs to do something, like contract in the case of muscle or think in the case of a neuron, or you'll see even more simply, repair itself or divide, it pays for it. It buys it with ATP. ATP is the essential energy currency that you pay for your vital organs to function, for your heart to continuously beat, for your lungs to rhythmically inflate, and for your intricate neurons to actively fire. If you don't have sufficient ATP, the entire system effectively declares biological bankruptcy. Put it another way, maybe a bit simpler. ATP is the way life stores and uses energy. And the ones responsible for all of this are the mitochondria, which are the power plants. They meticulously produce it from readily available glucose, various fats, and, to a somewhat lesser extent, also from essential amino acids. Well, at this crucial point, it's vital to remember a key and fundamental explanation. Food in and of itself is not solely what directly gives you energy. Rather, it provides the building blocks for energy production. What truly gives you vital energy is your remarkable ability to effectively convert the food you consume into usable ATP. In other words, if your mitochondria don't work properly, you can eat as much as you want, stuff yourself with food, and still feel tired. With age, sedentary lifestyle and inflammation, chronicle, that sarcopenia I was telling you about appears. And we started to lose muscle. And by losing muscle, we lose mitochondria. This means that over time, your body's metabolic processes gradually become less efficient and therefore less able to effectively burn and utilize the caloric energy you consume through your diet and daily intake. The food keeps coming in, you keep eating, but your body no longer knows what to do with it, with all that food you keep eating. Sugar builds up, fats build up, and then a toxic environment develops inside your body. It's poorly managed energy that inevitably turns into silent, insidious damage. That excess fuel you don't effectively burn ultimately transforms into clear signals of cellular damage and widespread inflammation, and that persistent peripheral metabolic state then actively induces systemic, body-wide inflammation throughout your entire system, which is called low-grade inflammation. The potent inflammatory signals cross or alter the crucial barrier that protects the brain and end up directly affecting it. You see, during deep sleep, the brain activates the glymphatic system, which is responsible for eliminate waste designs, remove toxic waste from neurons. But as we age, it turns out that deep sleep decreases and lymphatic efficiency drops. That dishwasher gets smaller. And if in addition there is chronic systemic inflammation and peripheral insulin resistance, the flow is reduced. Lymphatic flow. In other words, the cleaning system is not only smaller, but it also gets clogged. Waste accumulates, connections start to fail, and synaptic dysfunction appears. All of this manifests as brain fog, cognitive sluggishness, and memory lapses that are not caused by primary neuronal aging. In other words, it's not because your brain is old, but because you're making it live in a toxic environment. And alongside this, consider oxidative metabolic stress and how it activates cellular senescence programs, the so-called zombie cells. They don't die, but they remain. And by staying, what they do is secrete an inflammatory cocktail that damages all the neighboring healthy cells. And it perpetuates a state of emergency in your body. And now, what happens? As a final defensive mechanism, the tissues develop insulin resistance, the cells. What they want to do is reduce the entry of that excess glucose to protect themselves from the toxic overload. In other words, they close the door to glucose. And what is the result? It's called an energy paradox. And I'm going to tell you in technical terms. Hyperglycemia in the blood and intracellular energy starvation. So you can see that all of this is scientific. In other words, between you and me, your blood is full of energy and your cells are starting to starve. This global metabolic blockage is caused by sarcopenia. First of all, then inflammation, of course, mitochondrial dysfunction, and lymphatic deterioration. And then, of course, zombie cells and insulin resistance also play a role. In other words, this is what is scientifically described as what I was telling you, a metabolic grave. And you see, all of this happens without pain, without a fever, without any clear warning to alert you. And that's why it's so dangerous. I have to tell you this, and you need to understand it. You see, I'm here today to try to help you understand this, but also to tell you that I don't want you to leave feeling afraid. What I want is for you to leave with a map. Let's try to bring some order to this. First, in the kitchen, the muscle. Remember, your muscle mass is your life insurance. If you lose muscle, your burners, that is, your mitochondria, disappear. And then the excess sugar ends up becoming toxic. To the gym. Second, the roof is your sleep. If you don't clear the smoke from the kitchen by sleeping well, your brain enters a state of oxidative stress. It literally oxidizes, just as it sounds. You need to sleep and sleep better, because a dirty brain is a brain that shuts down. Third, consider the squatters, that is to say the senescent or zombie cells. These chaotic entities actively attract even more zombies, and their presence compels your healthy body to change its protective locks. Or, if you prefer a more precise and technical language, these persistent zombie cells forcefully compel your healthy functioning cells to implement those crucial changes themselves. Well, now you have the critical diagnosis, an internal combustion engine that doesn't efficiently combust energy, and a complex system that has completely forgotten how to effectively clean itself. And this is what happens when you leave the trash piled up and the wires exposed for years. The risk of fire skyrockets. And this fire we're talking about, moreover, is one that makes no noise, but ends up devouring everything. Everything. This fire is called chronic inflammation. And it's the enemy we're going to unmask in the next video. Get ready, because you're going to learn how to put out the fire. The inspection of the house continues, and with you by my side, as I always say, I go forward, always forward. And by the way, I read your comments. Thank you very much, and see you in the next video.